Padma, it is such a joy, such a delight to welcome you to the Worthy podcast. How are you?
I'm good. Oh my God, Sandra, this is such a treat. I get to see you and hang out with you. It's so amazing.
And you know what? I don't know why it's taken me this long to invite you because you're truly, and I've told you this before privately, and I'm gonna say it. Your energy, you have the most beautiful, most gentle, most. I'm such a fangirl. Can you tell I'm fangirling over you? But for anybody who's never met you, who has no idea why I am all tongue tied and fangirling over you, how would you describe yourself or how would you introduce yourself?
Oh, Sandra, the feeling is mutual. Let me just put it that way. I am such a big your heart. Really, and I was telling you right before we started, you're so magnetic and charismatic. Like I just like, woo, it sucked in anytime you start speaking.
And
Yes.
so, how would you describe yourself for anybody who's never met you, who's meeting you for the very first time?
So it's so funny because the way I see myself is not how the world sees me many times. So most people, like when they see me, that what they tell me is like, oh my God, like you're so calm and you're so like, you're just so peaceful. And that is not how my family sees me or how I see myself. I just see myself as, I don't know. I think it's hard to describe your own self. It's more like I'm here. I feel very mission driven in life. And so I live my life mostly from that place of like, how can I serve more? How can I really focus on that? Like, my only goal in this lifetime is, I don't know if I've ever said this openly, is to evolve my own self and to evolve other people, help other people evolve. That is it.
That's a huge mission, which based on what I know of you, and yes, that would be if you had asked me to describe you, I'd have said you're kind, you're sweet, you're gentle. But based on what I know of you and your passion, it is to help others evolve. And how do you do that? Like what's the work that you do in the world that helps others evolve?
So it's for me, the way I do the work for my own self and how I help my clients is to create this balance between your higher and your lower selves. What that means is the more work you do on the spiritual level on your higher self, the more you can bring that into your 3D world to create the life that you want and to live this life fully. But the goal is evolving your spiritual self first and then translating that.
Have you always been spiritual or have you always considered yourself spiritual? And what does that even mean? Like in your world, what does that mean when you say you're spiritual?
That's such an interesting question. So, right from when I was a kid, I grew up in India, so that would explain a little bit more about the spiritual. Like it's just in your vibe and your DNA and in your environment. Like it's just part of your living. And so, I remember when I was 10 years old, I picked up this book called The Autobiography of a Yogi. Have you
When
ever
you
read
were
that?
10?
When I was I was 10. And I'm not kidding you. This is a really fun, like a very amazing story. So I picked up this book and it's by Paramahamsa Yogananda. It's a very interesting book. Like he's a spiritual teacher. He's no longer on this planet. And I picked up this book and I'm reading it and I'm like, wow, I read this book at 10. Don't ask me like how it's, and then I, I remember talking to my mom and she told me I still have that copy. And I'm 47 right now. I still have that same copy that I was reading back then. And she said, yes, I read it when I was pregnant with you.
Wow.
And that was my first introduction on a conscious level to spirituality. And before that, I would see my parents go to yoga and they would meditate. And there was always like chanting in our home. So it was just part of how we lived. But this book was like the starting point of the spiritual experiences that I've started to have. But it was not easy. It was very much in the 3D world and struggle and like all of that. I think it's just now I've learned how to integrate the spiritual aspects to day-to-day living.
But
Before they were separate.
But you actually went a more quote unquote traditional route in that at one point you were a therapist. So tell me about what led to that path.
It's a very funny story. It's really funny because therapy was, like, again, like the indoctrination, right? Like how you're conditioned to live, and I was expected to do something in the science field, be a doctor, be an engineer. Like that was what was that. And I sucked at math. I still count with my fingers. So that was out. And I come from a family of gold medalists in the math field. My sister is a gold medalist, whatever. Like it was like my grandfather was a math teacher. Like I come from, and my dad's a banker, and I still count with my fingers. So you can see it was not my path. Obviously, I didn't know that back then. And I was like, I suck at everything. I'm no good at anything. That's how the conditioning was there. But I loved animals. Like I was passionate. I would just collect a lot of stray animals. I would bring them home, and I wanted to be a vet. And of course, my family, like coming from a very traditional Indian background, it's like, no, you're not doing that. So I was then studying. I was just looking up. So I read somewhere that animal psychology. I was like, oh, maybe I need to be a psychologist. Maybe then I can communicate with animals. So I was like, all right, I am going to be a psychologist. So I enrolled in my undergrad in a psychology program, thinking I'm going to learn about how to communicate with animals.
Well, I guess you were communicating with animals.
Humans are animals, I guess. I didn't understand the reference that animal psychology means human psychology. Who the heck knew? So I enrolled, and then that turned into a master's in clinical psychology, and then that turned into another master's in counseling psychology, which was in the United States. I moved to the United States to do my master's, and then I was like, all right, I've chosen this path. Let me do this work. Because it's no longer possible to be a veterinarian.
And so you literally, and you specialized, am I right that you specialized in relationship therapy?
Yeah, I was a couples therapist for 20 years. Now, the interesting part about psychology, I no longer practice psychology. I even gave up my license, mainly because I think when I found psychology, it was intriguing, right? Like at some point, like I really got into it, and it's about learning about yourself. And when I dig deeper, it was mainly to heal my own trauma. And it was very interesting when I would work with people, any issue, like when I was struggling with anxiety, my whole clientele would be full of people who had anxiety. And then it was about something, like it was always like something I was working through for my own self. And then it was inner child work. And then everybody that would come into my practice, I would just attract those kind of people. And we're kind of doing this work together. And then at some point, I guess I healed myself, and it no longer interested me. I was like, I'm done talking about the past. So I no longer want to do therapy.
Is that and that's something that I've been hearing. I interviewed another therapist recently who was talking about, like a lot of therapy is focused on the past and not really looking to the future. What would you say was your biggest struggle with being a therapist? Was it the focusing on the past?
When I was in it, it didn't feel it was exactly what I needed to do. Towards the end of my career as a therapist, I realized that I didn't want to spend time in the past because it was re-traumatizing for people. But what happens is we human beings, we are very attached to our stories, and we're very attached to why we feel, how we feel, and pinpointing that to something that happened in your past. And that no longer served where I was going or where I wanted to take people, which from a very higher perspective, none of these things matter. When you look at anything from a higher perspective, none of these things are important. You're here for a purpose. In this lifetime, you've chosen to come to this planet for a reason. And when you can embrace your life purpose, then the past doesn't exist, doesn't matter.
That's such a powerful thing because you're so right in that we're so stuck in our stories and then we want to justify our stories and then want to rehash our stories. And so is it literally as simple as like with the work that you do now? Is it as simple as me just deciding that's not my story anymore and I want to create a new story? How do we take that step from being stuck in the old story and then creating a new story?
So I still do go back to the old stories based on what's happening in the present moment. So I do a lot of energy work. I also trained as an energy healer for over 10 years. So I bring that element to it. So what happens is even though you're like, okay, I'm done with the old story, we still have those. It's how is it manifesting in your life today? Because often, like if you're struggling with confidence issues, it is related to something that happened in the past. So in that essence, I do go back to the past stories, but it is not for rehashing what is wrong and how can we put the blame on something else. It's about how can we focus on what's happening right now and utilize that. If you have confidence issues, for example, how is that showing up in your body? And then I use energy work to clear it. And then we also create new stories and new ways of being, new belief systems that you can then look at and adhere to, and thereby creating new life for yourself.
What is energy healing? Like, what does that mean for someone who has no idea, who's never heard of it? What is it?
So we are all energy beings. And the way I see energy work is like just channeling source energy through my system to help someone else heal whatever it is that is holding them back. So it's just bringing in source energy, which we all have access to. And I actually teach my clients how to do that because the last thing I want is for them to be dependent on me, because your issues are going to keep changing in life, right? We're always going to have different things that come in our life. So how can you utilize your own inner power to access source energy and to heal that?
That's a hard concept for some people to grasp. I know for me, for example, as someone who was brought up religious and was taught that there's a God up in heaven. And then for me, the way that I was taught was almost like blasphemous to believe that you are source energy. So are we all source energy? And what does that mean to be source energy?
In our purest form, I'll tell you a very quick story, which might just help summarize all of this. I was in the pool with my kids just yesterday, and there was a mom and a baby and the baby's grandfather in the pool. The baby looked so happy. Must have been like 6 months old, probably maybe 7. But just being in the water. And then she would hold the baby and the baby's legs would automatically start kicking. And then the moment it would touch the water, just his face would just light up and he would giggle like crazy. To me, that is source. That's how we're all meant to be. Right? And in that pure joy and bliss in the moment. And when you can access that, we all have access to it. But what do? Oh my God, I have to go pick up my kids and I have to go cook dinner now. And I'm getting all stressed because I'm out of time. And this is how we take ourselves away from that energy. So when we all have access to it, but it's just about bringing our intention and the awareness to heal whatever is no longer serving you. It's a moment by moment practice.
I love that. It is a moment by moment practice. Right? I love that word, the fact that you use the word practice, that it's something that we have to habituate ourselves to do, right?
Yeah. Yes, very much. Even today, this morning, like we're getting ready for school and my daughter is not moving because she's like, I'm not moving right now. Nope. I'm going to do my own thing. And I'm like, no, we got to go. And then was getting all frustrated with her. That is me moving away from source energy, right? In that moment, I'm like getting caught up in like time and all those things. And I had to remove myself. And then I was like, okay, how important is this? This is her second day of school. She's in kindergarten. Who cares, right? But how quickly we forget. Who cares if we go 10 minutes late? Does not matter. How do I want her to feel? How do I want to feel? But I had to remove myself to come back to that center, come back to my own center first, and then go and apologize to her for yelling. And like, get it, let's go. Like, why am I doing this? But that's work.
How do you teach kid. So it's almost like, I feel like, you told that beautiful story of the little baby who's in the pool who just knows joy. That's all they know is like to be joyful. But there is that point where kids start to grow, they start to go to school, they start to be conditioned in the world. How do we keep our kids in that state of joy, in that state of knowing that they are source?
I actually asked this question with our common mentor, Don Javier. I actually asked him this question, like, how do I keep my kids open? And it was such a beautiful answer. He said that you just do whatever you can right now, because there will be a phase in their life where they are going to want to move away from all of this. And that's okay. You just have to let them be. And we are humans. We learn through experience, and they will have their own experience. And all you can do is plant the seeds and let them be, because they're going to choose their own path. And that's okay, whatever they choose. But the way I do it with my kids, it's like every morning when we drive to school, we set our intention. That's how we start our day. We set our intention for what they want to create. And so it's like become part of our ritual. And then we say one thing we're grateful for, because whenever we focus on gratitude, it keeps your heart open. And then you're going to look for more things you're grateful for. Now, my kids, one of them will always reply, I'm grateful for everything. I was like, that's a lazy answer. Give me one thing you're grateful for. And he's like, no, I am grateful for everything. But I know, these things will happen. Like, I have to let them be. But what I'm doing is planting the seed.
And I know on your podcast recently, you have a gratitude challenge. Tell me about the gratitude challenge, and maybe we can share that with my audience about gratitude.
So one of the things I do every year is to pick a word for the year. And the word that came to me this year was gratitude. And I had set myself a challenge for being grateful every moment, everything that I do, I wanted to be grateful for that. That was my own practice that I wanted to create for my own self. So if I open the tap, if I flush the toilet, if I pick up this pen, if I have my phone, like I wanted to set a practice where I'm grateful every second, just even a moment of like gratitude. So I was like, why not bring this to my audience and ask them to practice gratitude for 30 days, where they can be grateful for everything that happens, whether your car breaks down, whether your wallet gets stolen, like does not matter. Can you be grateful for in that moment by moment by moment practice? And it's so incredible.
You know what? I hear you, and I hear you about practicing gratitude. I'm thinking, if you're someone who has just had a horrible diagnosis of a sickness, or has a child who's going through something difficult, it's challenging to say, I'm grateful. How do we be grateful in those moments it's easy to be grateful when things are going well, but how are we grateful for the things that feel really hard, really icky?
It's a very good question, because that is the hardest piece. But when you find gratitude in that experience, you'll see what all opens up. Speaking of illnesses, like I went through a phase in my life where for 5 years I was bedridden with an illness, with an autoimmune, that I could not even move. And I was not grateful at that time, far from grateful. All I would feel was resentment, anger, and complete like I just felt like the life was passing me by and everyone had a better life than I did. That was my state of mind. And guess what? It kept me stuck in my illness till at one point I was like, no, I'm going to let this go. And even after that, it was a process before I fully got better. But it was at that moment, now when I look back, I am so grateful for that illness, because it had opened up so much for me. I learned that was the beginning of my spiritual awakening process. But it also was like how I saw the beauty in going through those experiences, because now I can help so many more people when they're in pain, physical, emotional pain. I know how to help them because I've been through it. So for people who are going through specific challenges, even if you cannot find gratitude in that specific experience, see if you can find gratitude for other things. You're breathing air, you have a car, you have water in your, like we talked about this, like you grew up with no water, right? Like, and even things like that, the small things, can you find the gratitude in the smallest of the things, because when you do, you will eventually find gratitude in the things that you're resisting.
It's one of the most powerful things that I've learned is that if you can't be grateful for what you have now, how can the universe give you more? Like we're so stuck in looking at what we have as not enough. And even, as you said, in the challenges, because it's something else that I think we often forget is you can't appreciate the good times unless you've been through the bad times, right? Like you can't appreciate sweet unless you know what sour is. You can't appreciate light unless you know what darkness is. And so although it is challenging, I love that. So I'm going to take that on. I'm taking that on, and I hope others will join me too. 30 days of every single day being grateful for everything that is going on. And something else that maybe people are having a hard time, and I know this was your world for many, many years, is, for example, with relationships. How can we be grateful when we're going through a difficult season in a relationship, and how, based on the work that you did and that you still continue to do, because you still do deal with relationships, is how do you help people to heal their relationships or to make that decision to move on from their relationships?
Yeah. Relationships, they come into our life, especially your intimate partner. Your partner comes into your life for very specific reasons, and it is to help you grow and evolve. Whether you stay with them or you decide to leave, they're here for you for a particular reason. And we often find partners because we are trying to heal something within us. There's a great book. It's called Getting the Love You Want by Harville Hendrix. I'm sure you've heard of it. So in that, he talks about the wounding that we have as children, and then we find partners who we think are going to help us heal those wounds. And your partner's doing the same, right? They're coming to you unconsciously in the hopes that you will heal their wounds. And then when the honeymoon phase is over, which is often in 6 months, 6 months is the cutoff period. The honeymoon gets over. And then you're facing the real stuff. And if you can see the beauty in it, if you can see and I'm not saying that you don't have to stay with your partner. It's more about doing the work. They are here for you. They're holding a mirror up for you to see what your children are doing the same. They're holding a mirror up for you. And it's up to you to take that and to do your inner work. Because your partner cannot. I always joke that my husband is the mother I never had, because he really fulfilled that role. But guess what happened, right? Like when I felt complete in some ways, I wanted to leave, be the rebellious teenager saying goodbye, right? Like I'm done, right? But that's not, and he needed to not be the he needed to step away from the parental role. So we had to do our own individual work to feel complete within ourselves so that we could come back as a unit. But your partner is there to teach you lots of lessons.
I love that. I love what you just said about our relationships. And yes, we're talking here about maybe romantic relationships or spousal relationships, but all our relationships are really mirrors for the parts of us that need healing in some way. And so for you, what's the first step that when you have couples who come to you or people who are in relationships that are not the way that they want them to be, what's the first step that you tell them to take?
Inner work. Like even when I did couples therapy, I would have each of them do their inner work in front of their partner. First of all, it opens up vulnerability because your partner witnesses, like, where is this wound even coming from? It's never about the partner. Oh, you leave clothes on the floor. Like couples fight about the most silliest of the things. It's never about the clothes. It's never about the dishes. It's not about that. It's about feeling heard and understood. But when they can see where it's traced back to and that goes beyond them, it depersonalizes and they're like, oh, it brings compassion. It brings empathy. It makes you see your partner in a different light. The first thing, even when couples used to come in at the brink of divorce, I would ask them this one question. You chose each other amongst the millions of the people who live on this planet. You chose this one person. What made you do that? Because then they get to see like, wow, I chose this person for a reason. And they are not all of that, which means like I need to fulfill that within my own self. And it would always make them soften the issue. They'd be like, oh yeah, this is why we got together.
Oh, that's a deep question for you because it's so easy, especially like with relationship, as you said, once the honeymoon phase is over, you just get stuck in the mundane of every single day and you forget what it was that you saw in each other or what it was that drew you to each other. So that's a really powerful question for people to ask themselves in a relationship. Why are we together?
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And the expectations, it highlights so many things. Like you came in with all these expectations, your partner is going to be A, B, and C. It's more like your projection of that person, right? It's like you're not seeing that person for who they are.
What for you has been the biggest step or the biggest change that you've had to make within yourself, both in terms of relationship, whether it's with your husband or whether it's in terms of being a mom? Like, what's been the biggest growth that you've had to see within yourself as you've embarked on your spiritual journey?
I think the relationship has more than that. I think motherhood was really hard for me. Like I think that was the relationship stuff. Somehow it felt like, we just had this. He's my twin flame. Like we've gone through our ups and downs, but there was this level of safety and comfort with each other, and this knowing that we're going to help each other grow. But with motherhood, it's like a level of like giving up on of yourself in the beginning. That was the hardest piece for me because it felt like I had to pause my life. I didn't have to, but that's what it felt like I was doing. And the responsibility that came with that, a lot of work I had to do after I had my son. Like it was like bringing up things within me that I thought I'd work through another layer. Of course, so delusional, right? Like, oh, my work is done in this part. And then like, no, the universe is like, here you go. One more layer to shed. But it was the hardest piece to really come to terms with, wow, I've chosen this path to be a mother. And then how do I raise them to be for nurture who they are, and then also give them the environment that they need to flourish. It took a lot of work.
That it continues to, no doubt. Wait till you hit the teenage years. No, you know what? Like you said, I love what you said earlier on about like you're really helping them find who they are, and they will go on their path and figure out who they, just like we all did, right? When I think back to my gosh, what a horrible teenage child I was to my mother, that was my journey. And as my mother says, like, yes. Padma, so now that you've moved more into this space, we've moved away from doing therapy and more into this space of helping people evolve. What are the ways that people can work with you?
So you can go to my website, padmaali.com, or find me on Instagram or LinkedIn at Padma Ali. That's my handle everywhere. So, and my podcast. So they can just find me there. I do have like a free 3-part series or training that's available to anybody. The link is in my Instagram bio and my website. Like you can just sign up for that. So they can just get to know me a little bit more and see if I'm a good fit. So I basically do one-on-one work right now. And I may do some group work, not yet sure at this time. But one-on-one work is where I feel like I can go really deep with that person.
And I would, for anybody who's listening, we will link to everything, your website and as well as your social handles. I've had the privilege of knowing Padma, I don't know how many years now. We were in coaching together, and then now we are coaches together. And I honestly just cannot highly enough recommend working with Padma. She's truly such a beautiful soul, but also someone who can really help you go deep. And I think that that's often sometimes a difficult thing for us to do on our own. And so having someone who can hold you on that journey. So I highly, highly, highly recommend Padma and her services. And I'd love for you to finish the sentence for me, Padma. I am
powerful.
I love that. Why powerful?
Because we are all powerful beings. I was just reflecting on that just a few days ago. I was like, wow, if only we all knew our own power. We put ourselves in these tiny little boxes without realizing like how much power we have to create whatever we want in our life.
You are indeed powerful, and it has truly been my pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much, Padma, for making time for me today. And thank you for sharing so much wisdom that I know that I will be coming back to. So thank you so much, Padma.
Oh, Sandra, thank you. I'm so grateful for you.